Welcome back to part 2 of episode 4 and what goes into purchasing an investment property and how to evaluate an investment property. That's what part 2 here is going to kind of dive into, is how to truly evaluate a good investment and all the tools and methods that you can use to evaluate one of those investment properties. So here we go.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little interesting. So I plugged these exact numbers here from this Excel sheet: $200,000, 20%, 4% interest rate, 20 years, 3,000 property taxes, home insurance, 1,000, miscellaneous expenses, 2,400. I input this into this awesome calculator that I like to use, just calculator.net. But you can see these exact values are used in this calculator. So you'll notice that I kept these annual increase percentages at 0. This is not true. I just wanted to keep this simple. Property taxes go up and down. Insurance will go up and down. In some years, you might need to be saving a little bit more or less for those repairs that I was talking about. Your monthly rent, you are the landlord. You can increase this or you can decrease it. Say rental averages in your area are skyrocketing. This could go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% in a year if you wanted it to. Or if you have a tenant that has been extremely loyal to you, an extremely good tenant, and they've been renting it for 10 years, you might tell them, hey, you've been a great tenant. If you stay here for another 10 years, I won't raise your rent, or I'll actually drop your rent. Other monthly income, this could be if you have a garage, a parking lot, you charge for parking spaces, but we're going to keep it at 0. Now, you'll always want to account for vacancy rate on your property, because if you hold this for 20 years, there's a very rare chance that you won't have it fully rented out every single year. And this kind of goes into that CapEx as well. You can actually include this into your CapEx or annual maintenance money that you're setting aside from the rental income. Management fee, in this example, we're going to say you're managing it on your own, but typically, if you don't want to manage the property, you can hire what's called a property manager, and they will charge you 10% to 20% of the gross monthly rent. And they'll be the ones taking the calls at 2 in the morning that the toilet's broken. But in this case, we're just going to say that you're managing this on your own. Value appreciation, if you're in a booming market like Des Moines or Ames, we're just going to assume 2.5% per year on the value appreciation of this property. It might be 2% one year, might be 3% next year, but over 20 years, we're going to assume the average is 2.5%. You're holding it for 20 years. Once this thing's paid off, you're going to decide to sell it. So we'll scroll up here. For the 20 years invested, your internal rate of return will be 15.21%, which is awesome. The higher this number is, the better. And what IRR is, or internal rate of return, is the return on every dollar invested into this property over the time period that you own it. This is one of the better measurements in figuring out whether or not a property is a good investment. So your cash on cash return here is 840%. This 840% is over 20 years. This is not an annual percentage. This is the total return on your cash. As you can see down here, your cash on cash return is about 8.91%. Generally speaking, this is a really good rate. If you think about it, if you put $10,000 into the stock market and it got you about 9% per year for 20 years, that's a pretty good investment. Same thing goes with investing in rental properties. If you can find a cash on cash around 8 or 9% or above 7%, you're sitting pretty good. And your cap rate here is 7.6%. So generally, this is probably the quickest way to see if a property is worth investing in. It's a very simple calculation. It's net operating income divided by the price. You typically want your cap rate to be above 9%, but 7.6% is still a very good cap rate. And basically, when you're looking at an investment property, it's been rented out before. So you can quickly look at previous income statements from the previous owner and evaluate how this particular investment has rented out in the past, and it helps you gauge how it can perform in the future. And you'll see here, total profit when sold is about $336,000. And you can see down here, this is kind of the fun part. It'll actually show you what your internal rate of return will look like every single year for those 20 years. Cash to receive, if you sell it, but if sold at the end of the year, you began at negative 40,000 because that was your down payment. And of course, after year 1, your internal rate of return will be negative because you only received $36,000 that year. And then you'll see it skyrockets here, and your cash to receive also goes up every single year that you own this place. So this is kind of where people forget that cash flow isn't everything. Some investors don't necessarily look at all of these numbers. Of course, they look at them, but they might be looking at what it will look like 20 years from now. Someone might be comfortable with a 5% cap or a 10% per year internal rate of return because they know 20 years from now, or even 10 years from now, if they ever wanted to sell it, they've been accumulating tons of equity throughout that time period, and it still cash flowed something. Now, if you're in a booming market like Dallas or Austin or any of those booming cities right now, Denver, you might be getting 3%, 4%, 6% internal rate of return, but the value appreciation might be 8 or 9 or 10% per year. So if you held one of those properties for 200 grand, bought it in 2008, sold it in 2020, your $200,000 property may have doubled or even tripled. So there are those little factors to think about as well. So here you'll see, I switched this up. We're going to do scenario 2 if you're purchasing with cash. Same property, all the same values here. Now look at this jump. So your internal rate of return is actually about cut in half. Your cash on cash return is also way down. And you'll see the capitalization rate is exactly the same as it was with the loan because it's net operating income divided by the price, which is 200,000. This is an example where if you only look at the cap rate or only look at one of these different calculations or tools to put a value on whether or not an investment is a good investment isn't a good idea. Look at all the different types of investment tools to see whether or not it really is a good investment. So while cash on cash is actually down, cap rate is the same, and internal rate of return is almost cut in half, your total profit when sold is much, much higher. Actually about $80,000 higher than if you had used a mortgage to purchase this place. So now you can really see why people say cash is king when it comes to investing in properties. Because not only are you cash flowing about $1,300 per month in this scenario, but you're also going to come out on top an additional $80,000 more than you would if you had a loan. It's kind of a fun little calculator that you can use, and anybody can do this. All you have to do is find a real estate agent to help you get these values. Property taxes are public record. Insurance is just a guesstimate, but I highly encourage if you do use these calculators to just round up or do a very conservative number, just so you can see what a worst case scenario looks like. And if the numbers check out in a worst case scenario, imagine what it'll actually be like in a normal or best case scenario. But I'm not going to do the other properties just because of time constraints. But now you understand how to evaluate a good investment property, the different types of methods, and the difference in cost between investment financing and owner-occupant financing.
So there you go. If you're an avid investor or if you've bought investment properties in the past, this might have been just a refresher for you, but I hope this helps somebody that has thought of either buying an investment property or even if you haven't thought about investing in real estate. Hopefully you can kind of see the benefits to investing in real estate. And these last 2 videos were pretty data driven, so I apologize if there was a lot of numbers and it kind of went over your head a little bit. But if you ever have any questions, seriously, feel free to reach out. I actually encourage you to reach out and ask any questions you have about buying real estate, investing in real estate, or anything real estate related. I'm licensed to socialize. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.